Hey everyone, before we dive into this story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. These stories are long, emotional, and every detail matters all the way to the end. The text arrived at 6:12 a.m., just as dawn began to bleed pale light through the curtains of our apartment in Hamburg. Change of plans. You're staying home from Europe. My kids want their space. I read it 3 times, my thumb hovering over the screen, my chest tightening with a slow, familiar pressure. Europe. The word itself felt absurd now, considering we were already here, living in Germany, breathing the cold Baltic air, building a life that increasingly felt like a borrowed room. My wife, Katrin, was already gone. Her side of the bed was cold, the sheets pulled tight with the precision she used on everything lately. On the kitchen counter sat my passport, neatly placed beside a folded itinerary. Copenhagen, Vienna, Prague, a family trip she'd insisted on planning herself, or so I thought. I poured coffee and stared out the window at the canal below. A barge drifted past silently, its wake barely disturbing the water. Everything looked calm, ordered. But something foundational had shifted. My kids. She never used that phrase before. When we married 5 years ago, Katrin had 2 children from her first marriage, Lucas and Hannah. I never tried to replace their father. I didn't need to. I showed up. I paid for school trips. I helped with math homework in a language that wasn't mine. I sat through violin recitals and football matches in the rain. I became useful. By noon, she called. "You saw the text," she said, brisk, as if discussing groceries. "I did," I replied. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. The kids are uncomfortable. They need time. You'll understand. You're an adult." I thought of my father, standing silent in our Polish village when my stepmother told him I was no longer welcome in their home after my mother died. "You'll understand. You're almost grown." "I'm still your husband," I said. There was a pause, then colder. For now. I wasn't always this quiet man who accepted erasure politely. I grew up near Gdansk, where winters were cruel and history clung to everything like damp. My grandfather disappeared in the 80s after organizing dock workers. Officially, he emigrated. Unofficially, no one asked questions that could echo. My father learned survival through obedience. He taught me the same, mistaking restraint for wisdom. Katrin came from a different Germany. Post-wall confidence, inherited property, the certainty that systems bent if you knew where to apply pressure. Her ex-husband, Rolf, was proof of that. A corporate lawyer who paid generous child support and remained permanently influential. He never liked me. I saw his fingerprints everywhere, in Lucas's sudden hostility, in Hannah's silences, in Katrin's shifting language. My kids, her space. That evening, I opened the shared laptop. I didn't hack anything. I simply followed patterns, emails, calendar invites, hotel bookings in Copenhagen under Katrin's maiden name. Rolf included on several threads, copied casually, like a ghost invited back into the house. The trip wasn't for Europe. It was for reunification. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I visited my Aunt Sophia in Lübeck, where she ran a small pension overlooking the Trave River. She had lived through worse betrayals than mine and survived by documenting everything. "Never shout first," she told me, pouring soup. "Shouting warns people." I began assembling a record, not just of Katrin, but of Rolf, his offshore accounts, his quiet influence over municipal contracts in Hamburg and Rostock, his habit of using family law as leverage. I wasn't vengeful by nature, but I understood systems. I had worked compliance for a shipping firm, boring work, invisible work, the kind that noticed irregularities others ignored. Autumn deepened. Leaves rotted along the sidewalks. Katrin sent photos from Prague, the kids smiling, her face carefully cropped to avoid reflections. She returned 3 weeks later. We sat across from each other at the dining table like strangers negotiating a ceasefire. "This isn't working," she said. "The kids come first." "They always did," I replied. "That was never the problem." She slid a folder toward me. Separation terms. Generous, she thought. Temporary housing. Silence clauses. "You'll be comfortable," she said. "You can start over." I thought of my grandfather, of vanished men and erased names. Comfort was the currency of disappearance. "I won't fight you," I said softly. She looked relieved. The investigation began 2 months later. An anonymous report triggered a review of several redevelopment deals tied to Rolf's firm. Environmental violations, conflict of interest. Nothing dramatic, just enough to pull threads. Katrin called me, furious. "Did you do this?" "I stayed home," I said. "Like you asked." Rolf's reputation cracked, not shattered, but enough that his influence waned, enough that his presence became inconvenient. The children noticed. Lucas stopped parroting his father's phrases. Hannah began texting me again, tentative, apologetic. The divorce finalized quietly. Katrin moved closer to her parents. Rolf faded into careful obscurity. On a gray morning, much like the first, I packed my bags. This time, the passport was mine alone. I stood at Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, watching trains depart for cities I'd only ever visited in service of others' plans. The air smelled of steel and rain. My phone buzzed. A message from Katrin. I didn't open it. The train doors closed. The platform slid away. For the first time, Europe wasn't something I was excluded from. It was something I chose.